Thank you. Well, on the question on data, when you're collecting a lot of data, that's always a challenge. Whether you're collecting it from public agencies or private agencies. The first one I think is just the process of getting permissions to get the data. Not all data is easily available online, so you do have to ask permission for data sets, and not everyone is connected through an API, so you can't you got to ask permission for that that connection as well. But that's very addressable. I think the challenge might be more on the technical side in terms of connectivity and server capacity. So if server capacity on the other side is slow, for instance, it's not easy to grab the data. If the connectivity is not there, it's not easy to collect that data. So that has been a bit of a challenge. We do have a data privacy law in place for the Philippines, but we're not dealing with personal data. We're dealing really with larger aggregated data sets. So which is what our interest is in. We do send out advisories, but that's to a limited sort of closed list that we have, so that's not a problem in terms of our ability to send out. Again, the primary mode is either through phone or email, but should those connections go down, and they can in a massive event, earthquake and whatnot, then we'd have to think, what are the other forms of connectivity we need to put in place, and it'll have to be, we'll have to start jumping to radios and satellite phones and mesh networks and things like this. But those are technical issues. The data itself is, with a little work, fairly easy to get.
On the government side, as what Mr. Guillermo has been discussing, data has been one of the innovations that governments also utilize. So how do we use it? So for example, for quantifying the contingent liabilities that the government would face in terms of losses through disasters, we compute them through risk analytic tools. So another one is for insurance purposes. How, like now we're developing with the Insurance Commission and the private sector, how satellite imagery could be used to assess crop insurance and how to have forecast-based financing based on weather patterns. So another one that we've been trying to innovate is the GeoHazard Philippines. So this is an ongoing program with the Department of Science and Technology, where eventually we want individuals to upload the risks that attach to them, but then we have to verify how you could see the quality, ensure that the quality of data is correct. So another type of technology that we're trying to include in terms of disaster risk financing is how do you incorporate disaster payouts through mobile apps, because a lot of the Filipinos are unbanked in the unbanked sectors, but most of them have Facebook, most of them avail of micro insurance, because pawn shops now in the Philippines are evolving to provide short-term loans or money transfer facilities. So they usually use it through cell phones, like when you transfer prepaid credits, the mobile providers now provide like GCash and all these other mobile types of payments. So now that we are rolling out with the national ID system, then how can we utilize these types of payments to help those in the far-flung areas get their social services or the insurance payouts through mobile apps and all these things. We're not that far ahead, but we're trying to see how we can incorporate this, because there, like in the Philippines, there are a lot of laws that that limit what you can do. So you really have to go through it one by one, and because it's something new, not everyone is keen to dive head on first. So the government is trying to ensure that in all the things that we do, like especially in technological innovation, data privacy is still respected, the quality of data is ensured. So all these things are incorporated in the planning stage.
Yes, compared to traditional data, using the non-structured data is somehow very difficult. Our example, during one typhoon, our system might found maybe 100,000 posts from the internet about one typhoon, but as a result, it proves only 200 available. So over 99% useless. But however, the 200 available is still very important, help us understand the situation, especially during some urgent time. So our process, first we're crawling data from the social media. Then we will screen to find out useless and available. The number 3 is about to locating, finding where they are. Last step, mapping, because we want to tell about situation. So through that 4 step, we try to create kind of situation map, help the general public and the decision maker in EOC understand what happened and what's happening, and compare like before and after, tell the situation is solved or not, or continue developing. That's very important. But another very important thing when we use the social media, it also help us to clarify some fake news. We have some example. Sometime during the disaster event, we might see a lot of fake news circulate on the internet. So another job of my office, when we receive kind of fake news, we'll use scientific evidence to fight back. Because we have a lot of data sensors, we can prove nothing happened there. So that is historical photo, not real photo. So how to make use of social media? It's kind of learning process. First of all, we know it's a good source about what happened. But another problem is we must clarify it's correct or not. So another approach right now in my office, we try to collaborate with some organized NGO. They help to collect information and post on our website. So we must find several ways to collect some trustable big data from the different groups. So it's a learning process. I think maybe 5 or 10 years later, we could find more good rules to understand how we make most use about the big data, especially from the social media.
Well, yes, how to bring stakeholders together and make it really happen. I guess, this example between OECD and ADB is a good example of what we can do. I think it really is, first of all, triggering a policy dialogue, involving all stakeholders, provide capacity building, exchanging experience, but providing also tools in order to understand better what is the benefit and the cost and the benefit of implementing such measures. So I guess we do have a two-step approach. Triggering this policy discussion is really trying to get a consensus about what is the enabling environment which needs to be created. So for this, we need stakeholders come together and understand the risk and understand what is the financing gap at the governments and at the private sector, and how can we fill this. We need to set up a disaster risk management and disaster risk financing strategy, comprehensive, like the Philippines are really well progressing. And then we need also, and that's what we are doing, we try really more general support, strengthening the insurance sector in the developing countries, but also to strengthen the regulatory framework so that it can really embrace all these innovations. But I think most importantly is then to develop a product and to have these discussions at a very, very concrete level. And for this we are leveraging lots of trust funds. We have the High Technology Trust Fund. We have, so the name speaks for it, right? We have a venture facility, which the private sector operation development is setting up in order to identify startup companies that in which can be invested and which can be promoted. We have specific funds really trying to promote innovation and technology and related to disaster risk. And so I think this creates a leeway to come up with pilots. Just before closing, we'd like also to say these so-called innovation challenges, you can witness, because this evening there will be the hackathon agri challenge, where the top 3 selected company of a large number will present their case, and you can vote and you can select actually the winner. So I think again, piloting, becoming very concrete and identifying the issue. I think a good example is, as Paula also mentioned, this PCDIP, the Philippine city disaster insurance pool, which involved a lot of stakeholders, and suddenly we saw, well, there is a legal barrier, so how can we overcome it? I think that's the way to go forward.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to open questions to the floor. Oh, there's quite a few. There's always Jun-Kyun first. Do you want to go to the microphone and please identify yourself and then bring your question?
Okay, my name is Jun-Kyun Lee. I'm Chief of Finance Sector Group of ADB, and thank you very much for this very meaningful policy discussion. I have one quick question, a lot of questions actually, but just limit the questions to only one. All of the discussion so far seems to be really good, actually very good, but it's focused on the national response to the national natural disasters. So here is, as you know, the regional disaster mechanism. It's also of our main interest, and if you develop the very different way, the national disaster response mechanism confined to only for the national disaster risk, and it may not be effective for regional disasters, and actually. And also we are seeing the regional disasters also coming to this Asia-Pacific region. And one big example, we have a tsunami years ago, right? So my question is that it's, in addition, we know the urgencies in that, national response, but also we know once you develop something, you want to develop, interoperable, right, in cross sectors and cross countries, because main focus here is how to apply our innovative technology to foster these disaster risk management and financing, right? So just one country goes along and may not be so much effective. In terms of the current situation, we are seeing these natural disasters in the regional level is also huge cost into the region. So I'm just wondering how you think about these, because this is really new stage. We are talking about this application of the new technology and innovation. So maybe, I know the technologies, we use Apple, we use Galaxy phone, we use a Huawei phone. So at least these technologies are pretty much standard, right? But we are seeing that each country's natural disaster response is very much differentiated, not really like we use our cell phone in our daily life. So I'm just wondering how you think about that kind of regional disaster risk management, including facility financing, and I just want to know your view for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone, okay.
Thanks. That's a great question. So, in practical terms, what happens natural disaster at the national level is that for help to be deployed from overseas requires actually the national government to issue that call for help. If it doesn't, then the offering country cannot move and bring help. So even within ASEAN, the AHA Center, you need to make a call to trigger off the ASEAN regional system. I think within the UN system, it's the same for any country, even on a bilateral basis. That call needs to be made, and absent that call, international humanitarian work doesn't flow so freely. I don't know if it can flow through NGOs. Say the Red Cross system can maybe make assistance flow based on Red Cross to Red Cross, which is typically the way assistance is given. I think where a regional approach could be used is actually in the risk insurance end of things. For instance, the catastrophe bonds, as I mentioned, for the Pacific Alliance, it was a catastrophe bond among four countries. 3 of them from APEC, which is Mexico, Chile, and Peru, and then Colombia, which is not. But they formed the Pacific Alliance, so they had their own catastrophe bond system regionally. I think for APEC, it would work if and also spread the risk and create a bigger pool if we took a look at some of the countries within or economies within APEC that are affected by natural disasters. So that's easily Philippines, Indonesia, Chinese Taipei, I think Hong Kong, Vietnam, Thailand, just in the neighborhood that are susceptible to typhoons and to earthquakes. So maybe that could be the regional mechanism, but the actual physical call for help requires a message from the government which has been affected.
How I understood your question, for regional disaster risk actions, there are two actually in Asia Pacific. So you have the APEC and you have the ASEAN. So in both the APEC and the ASEAN, you have the working groups for disaster risks. So for example, in the APEC, it's headed by the Philippines and Japan. So what we do is we create work plans that the countries who join the working group get themselves involved. Like for example, we have Indonesia, we have New Zealand, we have different countries from the Asia Pacific region, and usually in different workshops and forums, we try to exchange knowledge. Because sometimes, for example, Indonesia is more advanced as compared to the Philippines in terms of crop insurance. So they would present what they've done, so other countries in the region would know what they could do based on how Indonesia did it. For the Philippines, we presented our DRFI strategy to show Okay. So what we do is we try to create a work plan so that when the finance ministers endorse it, then each of your country would have milestones that they would have to report in the working group. Like for example, let's say this country already have a risk layering approach as well. So they've also included risk transfer mechanisms. So the same is for ASEAN. And then for the facilities, now Japan together with Singapore is heading the SEADRIFT, or the Southeast Asian Insurance Disaster Risk Facility. So this is akin to the Pacific Alliance, so they also have their pooling of risks. So now I think the members are Singapore, Japan, Laos, Myanmar, Philippines. I'm not sure of the others, but it's a continuing group. So Japan is heading it together with Singapore because, as you know, Japan has most of the typhoons, the tsunamis, and they have a lot of experience in terms of earthquake. So actually in the Philippines, we get a lot of technical assistance for retrofitting, and for our subway, Japan is also helping us to make it earthquake resilient. So they're actually leading in the Asia Pacific region in terms of that. So you also have New Zealand, Australia, because they're also situated within the Pacific Ring of Fire. And in the APEC, Chile is also leading because they're opposite the Philippines. So for example, an earthquake happens in Chile, because we face each other, something would happen in Asia as well. So we're helping each other to exchange experiences on that.
No, let's final you and then we go to the floor again.
No, they have covered what
Oh, they have covered, okay. Then, can we keep it short because I think we want to get the floor.
As you know, I also, as the co-chair of APEC Emergency Preparedness Working Group, EBWG, to the group, actually we discussing a lot of non-traditional issue about disaster risk management, because APEC not focus on search and rescue. Likewise, after 2011, after Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, we proposed one idea about the BCP, Business Continuity Plan for small and medium enterprises, though it became one of the milestones on the APEC. So as a disaster manager, of course, we might think something non-traditionally. Otherwise, we just focus on search and rescue and emergency relief. So we should open our eye to look at other issues might related to disaster and use that as the vehicle to change people's mindset. That's a short comment.
Very shortly, just to complement, I think the regional aspect would certainly complement the national aspect. So I think you cannot. It's a comprehensive approach, and I think it would certainly have benefit also for smaller countries getting together so that the cost of being together would be reduced. We are currently talking to the Central and West Asia CAREC region and countries in order to establish something like that. I think on cat bond, there's innovation also still needed, because the payout so far goes to the government and then it's up to the government. So we could actually go a step further with technology that the payout directly goes to the people. So these things needs to be evolved. And one last thing is regionally, sometimes it's difficult. Yes, economically there is dependence, and an impact in one country can impact the economy from the other, but still it's difficult actually to pool together when it comes to public assets. So I still think that the humanitarian aspect is actually a very important one, and the private sector is submitting an initiative to the ASEAN, perhaps to be implemented on CDRIF, which really strengthens the humanitarian HA Center and ATMER fund.
The gentleman, the Indonesian gentleman.
Thank you. My name is Widyo from Indonesian Financial Service Authority. Thanks for your presentation, very clear, but I still lost some point. One is usually from Mr. Agrafal and Ms. Alvarez from the Philippine experience. In the level of area, this is technical question. I mean, this is not only national, right? If parametric insurance, so in terms of province, municipality, and maybe more smaller area, right? It can be. What kind of contract actually? Is it contract by the head of municipality, if like earthquake, something like that? Contract between municipality and the private insurance. And also, how will claim handling? Is it, in my point of view, if parametric insurance, the claim handling is very easy, right? There's no need data, because data is just earthquake, something like that. So, last question, reassurance, about the reassurance. In India also, in Philippine experience, do you have also reassurance? Because usually there's a very big, very difficult to private insurance to cover the parametric insurance. And usually from Switzerland, it's very big.
Last one.
Yeah. The last one is for Mr. Kessler. Thank you. Right now, we have assistant for the regulatory sandbox from ADB. And I just asked, is it any assistant in terms of parametric insurance? Because our target is change the national law. Because national law still, like I said before, still not cover the parametric insurance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to be clear, parametric insurance is not indemnity based, and so therefore the claim is sort of predetermined. So I just want to make that highlight, because it doesn't cover, the payout is not dependent on the actual losses. And so, should we go from here?
So from my experience, even for parametric insurance, it helps if the payments can be directly made to the end customer, beneficiary, the person. Even the governments or municipalities lack this infrastructure, lack the know-how how to distribute. Let's say if an earthquake has happened, you pay to a municipality. The municipality then has to decide how to distribute that claim money among its residents. So they also look up to the insurance companies or to understand how to distribute this money. So at the end of the day, the requirement is to really develop a NatCat index or a parametric index which can deliver the claim to the beneficiary, because that's what the governments also want. And we have been working on this, and I think we have some products which can deliver claims directly to the end beneficiary. So that was the question.
So, just to give a background, in the Philippines, our law provides that for local government units, they are supposed to allocate around 5% of their internal revenues for disaster risk preparedness. So, in our first case, the provincial parametric insurance, this was specifically included in our Government Appropriations Act. So, our Congress included a provision allocating budget for parametric insurance specifically. So it's quite tricky because in the Philippines, all government assets and government employees can only get insurance from the Government Service Insurance System. So that's the GSIS. So for that reason, we could not get contracts from private insurers. So what we did for the first one was we developed with the World Bank the pilot, where we chose the provinces depending on the risks attached to them. So they're mostly from the eastern seaboard. That was the one hit by Typhoon Haiyan for typhoons, and some parts